That seems to be something that we're seeing resonating now, and it's really kind of, now that you mention it, it's the marriage of kind of the database world with the DevOps world, right? So, um, what's your experience on this quicker time to market, and how they're looking for quick turnaround on development of applications and enhancements to the databases, and what they're doing for mobile apps and things like that these larger enterprises are putting out there for their end users. How do you see DevOps influencing the DBA's life?
Well, I think you hit it there. It's the speed and agility that our customers are looking for. So as their business units are saying, "Hey, we got to develop this mobile app to track, the price of grapefruit," they're being, coached and really forced into having to make these quick dynamic changes. So they're having to send this stuff quickly to the cloud to make these IoT type of interactions.
Sure.
So they're having to go that route, and if we can help facilitate them by getting that workload up to the cloud for this development, or for the traditional life cycle of this new application, I think that's a huge benefit to us, and our architecture really is key to that. For us to be able to only move changed bits to the cloud and not have to move entire data sets time and time again to do that replication.
Interestingly enough, Jen, you were actually at a database show recently. How did that go? And were some of the things that Doug's talking about really resonate with some of the things you heard at that conference?
Which conference?
Very good question. I didn't specify. SQL Pass.
Okay, so SQL Pass is interesting because the DBAs and the IT admins actually really work well together.
Cool.
A lot of them are very familiar with the infrastructure, right?
Yep.
The backup infrastructure that they are using.
Okay.
The conversation around cloud is still really kind of just omnipresent.
Right.
I didn't have any really strong conversations with customers around it.
Okay.
And we weren't really emphasizing it. We're still very heavily focused on infrastructure.
Interesting. Okay.
But the conversations overall and variety of interactions that I have had with customers is around test dev.
Okay.
And QA.
So a lot of the same use cases
correct.
that Doug was talking about, yeah.
Correct. It's not just about, backup and archive, let's just move our data and dump it to the cloud. It's less than a year usage of using the cloud platform, and then going on to another project.
Right.
For backup and for databases, correct.
So Doug, hearing that and hearing what you explained, it sounds like cloud is being used as kind of an accelerator for test and dev and things that are being done in production. And I would imagine that eventually all of that will get moved into where cloud will now be part of that production scenario. But it seems to me like right now we're heavily entrenched in leveraging cloud for speeding up test dev and DevOps. Is that correct?
That seems to be where most of our customers' focus right now is on the cloud. Like I said, there's the two use cases. The one, speeding up test and dev cycles, I think is definitely one of the really more key, interesting conversations that we're having. The traditional lift and shift, it's still there. I think that's a well ingrained talk track that most of our teams have. But this is the new one that I'm seeing. Is definitely kind of the latest use case for cloud that I'm hearing a lot more of from our customers.
Right.
So I was just kind of thinking about Cloud DR as
Sure.
well. So cloud disaster recovery. I just wonder too, Doug, that when customers are doing this development work, that recovery is going to be more and more important to them as they use cloud for their primary resource. So what do you say on that?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting use case. Cloud DR, I think for a lot of customers is still, I don't want to call it its infancy, but it's definitely, early on in a lot of companies' minds on, how can they leverage the cloud for that use case. As Power2Protect becomes more robust with its, Cloud DR integration,
Mm-hmm.
I think we're going to have that ability to move the database workload with Cloud DR up there. There's still the challenge of how do we do that? Are we moving just a database backup, or are we moving an entire VM with an app consistent backup up there?
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of things we still have to look at from the customer standpoint, and what's their use case for Cloud Diva.
That just leads me to one more question about technology in this space and new innovation. What do you think, based on conversations you have with your customers, what do you think they want to see next from Dell Technologies?
That's a good question, Jen.
You don't have to answer it today.
Put on your speculative hat. Just from perspective of what you've heard these customers talking about, what their pain points are as we move into these new paradigms, as we move into DevOps, right? What in-memory databases is another big shift that's going on right now. SAP HANA is another big thing that everybody's been tasked with migrating to over the last year. What kind of things are they kind of having a little bit of agita about going forward as they take on this next wave?
Yeah, so I think there are so many things they're being tasked with.
Right.
One of the biggest things that I think customers are really looking for is the automation. Hey, I'm standing up new databases.
Mm-hmm.
They automatically be protected. How do we automate that for our customers? And I think that's really one of the things they're looking for. And Power2Protect again is leading the front with that. With the dynamic filters, for us to be able to go ahead and say, okay, Mr. Customer, you have this naming convention in your databases. As they get registered, as they come into the mix, we can automatically apply protection lifecycle policies to these databases. So I think it's the automation, it's the let's take out human intervention,
right,
from traditional backup, and not having to go open a ticket and say, hey, Mr. Backup team, I got a new SAP HANA instance coming in. I need this thing backed up. Let's give them the automation. Let's give them the seamless modernization of data protection.
Right. It's hooking natively into those up and coming DevOps workflows. And like we talked about earlier, making backup invisible, right? It's now about making these processes that allow you to concentrate more on the bigger picture invisible, and invisible through automation, right? And how we make things easier for those that are architecting and configuring these more efficient workflows and better uses of databases. So that's definitely a good point.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. What I don't know, what Alex, did you want to ask something before I ask the big questions?
No, please. I like big questions.
Okay,
so please go ahead. Go ahead.
So the question that I've been burning to ask: what are your favorite stories? What are your favorite customer stories? Whether it's current, maybe a current and a classic. Mm-hmm. That would be amazing. Thanks, Doug.
Yeah. So, there are so many. It's so much fun to go out and talk with these customers, show them this technology. Mm-hmm. I can't even begin to tell you how many times I've got into an SAP HANA instance with these customers and shown them how simple our solution is. I'll go and do a demo with customers for SAP HANA and using Backup Direct, and I'll do the pitch, I'll do the demo, and 15 minutes later we're done, and I look at the guys and I'm like, I can't make this any harder. I wish I could, but it's just that simple. And they're all just sitting there going, really? I thought this was going to be this huge complex uplift to get this thing in. So for them to be able to adopt this and move forward is really amazing. Our professional services guys aren't going to like to hear this, but it's so easy that I can pretty much go in as a pre-sales person, show them how to do this on one or two systems, and they're deploying it themselves. They're not having to, do this big, huge uplift project of, bringing resources in. It's just that simple for them in a lot of cases. So that's one of the biggest things. The other one is just the simplicity of recoveries. That's the other thing that these customers love. Is like, oh, I need to go do this. How do I do that? And it's like, oh, we need 2 clicks over here, and you're done, and you're doing your recoveries. So that to me is the biggest win for our customers, and some of the I don't know, the times I like to see the smiles on their customers' faces when they're like, "Oh, I thought this was going to be really hard." So that's probably it, Jen. I wish I had a better, overall use case, but it's just so many of them like that.
I don't know. I really love your subjective observations. It's really nice, but I really like numbers better, Doug. My customer was able to move X amount of petabytes from 24 hours to 2 minutes, something dramatic. But no, it's all good. I think that's really awesome. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah, I think so interestingly enough, I've got another big question, right? So Doug, when you go and talk to these customers and, let's say they go ahead and implement this technology, they're working through their day-to-day backup and recoveries. We always talk about going through the backup process, but we never hear, and when we do hear it, rarely, we get really awesome stories around recovery scenarios. What is an incident, maybe, and generically, right? An incident of a customer that has actually kind of, quote unquote, saved their butt with this technology.
Well, sure. So, one of our public references, SAP HANA, is Johnsonville Sausage. And the one that saved them was their DR testing. Our contact over there, Andy, was using a competitive product, tape-based, to do DR planning.
Okay.
They were failing their DR recovery tests. They would go out and they would have maybe a 50% success rate on recoveries of the DR workload. They implemented DD Boost for their HANA environment, and the first time they went to do a DR test, they had 100% success on recoveries. And they went from, here's your numbers. They went from a 12-hour backup window. They're now down to less than 45 minutes for protecting their SAP HANA landscape. So, the numbers are there when we start to really drill into individual customers. But yeah, that was the biggest one for them. It saved their bacon.
It did save their bacon. hashtag saved my bacon.
There you go. Save your bacon. I like it. Johnsonville sausage and bacon. You're making me hungry now, Doug.
Yeah, that is.
Making me hungry.
That's fantastic. We also have a ton of vertical reference customers, and I'm always amazed at, if you really look under the covers of what they're doing, they're moving a tremendous amount of workloads. And for example, healthcare, we have a lot of healthcare customers that just absolutely, rely on our data protection solutions.
Yeah, and it's literally there, not to be punny on this, but it is literally life or death in that situation. I mean, when you need data in a situation like a healthcare vertical, it becomes incredibly important, and it's incredibly important to a lot of these businesses that Doug has been visiting and talking with. Doug, like we mentioned before, you have the honor of being the first guest on our inaugural podcast of this series that we're starting up here. So thank you very much for your time, and we look forward to having you on another podcast, hopefully soon.
Thank you, Doug.
Well, you're welcome, guys. Thanks for the time. It was a pleasure to be part of the inauguration.